Welcome, I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. I'm very pleased to see that you have your notepads and pens ready because we're going to cover a lot of ground today. Today we're going to talk about SOPs, standard operating procedures. Now don't turn off the video right now unless it is because you need to grab your notepad and pen. I do have some resource materials that I'm going to go through with you on this, and I'll endeavor to share those with you as free downloads so you can reference this stuff later. But I get it. Standard operating procedures, that's sort of a boring topic. That's probably nothing too exciting for any of you, but remember, this isn't always about excitement. This is about driving your business forward. You need to take down a note that you can implement in your business today, some sort of action item. Implementation, driving your business forward is what this is all about, and I think you'll get some good content here that you can use in your business. So the first thing I want to ask is why? Why a standard operating procedure? Do you have standard operating procedures in your business? Of course you have them, but what I'm really referring to is, do you have them documented in some way? Do you have some sort of binder or some central resource where anyone could go to and figure out how it is that you do a specific process and maintain your standards? You have standards, you want to make sure that you add the very most value that you can to all of your processes so that you can add value to your products and services and deliver that value to your customers. And so I want you to think about whether or not you have a good central resource, reference materials in which you have documented all of those things to which you want your whole organization to uphold a specific standard. Those processes, those logistical steps that you go through, those procedures that everyone should follow each and every time to get a predictable result. These are recipes. Essentially, you can understand that if you're in the kitchen and you were making something for the first time, that you'd want to follow a recipe if you wanted a predictable result. And I can get it where some of you in business, or many of you as managers, have done something so frequently, or the person you rely upon to do those things has done it so frequently for so many years that it's second nature. They don't really need to rely on any sort of resource. That is the pitfall though. That's why we trick ourselves in spite of our best interests. We trick ourselves into believing this is not necessary. So let's ask ourselves why. What benefits do you get out of a standard operating procedure? Well, the first one is that you do have a centralized resource, some document, something, some place for a person to go to get information about how it is that you carry out a particular process. And even if the person who does that process is well informed about it, you still will benefit from having it, because by creating it, the very process of creating the standard operating procedure will expose mental gaps that you have. And you don't want any one person by himself to do this, to create your standard operating procedure. Instead, you want this to be a collaboration. Now, a best practice would be to have the person who is most responsible for carrying out the process, or the people most responsible for carrying out the process, to design the nuts and bolts, the skeleton, the outline of the standard operating procedure. But then other people get involved, other stakeholders and management get involved in everything, so you can make it more comprehensive. You know, when we talk about those people in your organization who do the same things over and over, and they don't really need a resource reference material like this to which they can, go back from time to time to remind them how to do a particular process, those people become unconscious competence, and they're not always the best to train someone else on how to do a process. So the first thing is to expose knowledge gaps that others in your organization have. The other thing this mental exercise of going through this causes you to do is ask yourself if you are doing things the most efficient way. And when you start to itemize things, there's often revealing things that come out and you go, oh, I didn't realize we're doing that still. and somebody else, maybe not the person who's carrying out the procedure, what you'll often find is that person's doing something over and over because that's how they were taught in the beginning. But now you have a new resource in your organization. You have some new technology, some more efficient way of doing something, a different supplier of something or other. And by collaborating, you start to realize, oh, there's some innovation possible here. So that's the second benefit. Aside from exposing knowledge gaps, you will also be able to pinpoint areas for refinement and improvement as different people look at it. The third real benefit I see to doing this is the ability to decentralize the process itself and to be able to rely on more people. You can start to expand and distribute the responsibility of something beyond one person. And there's a lot of, say, employment security and personal insecurity that goes along with having your value, your responsibilities decentralized and having more than yourself that is able to do it. But that's really critical for business. People do get sick. People do move on and go to other employment opportunities. And you know, there are people who go on leave, they go on vacation, all sorts of things. And it's nice to be able to have somebody else fill in seamlessly. And this is what I mean by decentralizing the ability to do a particular task, a particular process. There's somebody else who needs to temporarily fill in, or maybe you actually lose someone permanently and you need to now train somebody new. And I don't know if you call that a fourth benefit, but again, it's the ability to teach somebody else how to do a process. And you as the, say, manager or the owner of the business don't have to necessarily be so involved each and every time, because they can refer to these reference materials. These are resources that are good for everyone. And I'm telling you, it behooves you as a manager, as a business owner, to have these resource materials that many people can reference. Like, think about yourself. If you lost a key member of your team and all of a sudden you have to do something in accounting, or you have to do something administratively, or in your production, some logistic relies on you, and you're like, I've never done that for so many years. I've had other people to do it. Now you're scrambling trying to hire someone new, and then you're trying to think, well, how do I train them? We're going to sort of work our way through this together. But if you've had this resource created by the team that was most responsible and a lot of collaboration, there's huge benefits to that. And so a best practice, another best practice, if we've covered enough on the benefits, well, I actually have a couple more benefits. I have at least one more benefit I want to discuss. But another best practice is to take somebody, when you're creating these standard operating procedures, take someone who has never done the process before and have them do the process exclusively following the instructions, the standard operating procedure that you have created. And see, you'll be able to sort of give yourself a score on how comprehensive and how effective you were in creating this resource material based on the ability of that new person. And it doesn't have to be someone new to the organization, but someone different doing that particular task. And to the extent that there's no specialized knowledge or specific expertise and skills involved, just instructions, again, if we use the analogy of a recipe, then anyone should be able to do it. Of course, the chef, in a recipe analogy, the chef who's been, has specialized information and skills and has years of experience, that person is going to likely get a better outcome. But somebody starting from scratch with a really good recipe and really good set of instructions could probably pull it off. And in a pinch, you could still get the thing done. So that best practice is to have somebody who's never done it. If you get the person who already knows what they're doing, tried to follow the SOP to do the process, you can appreciate that doesn't really add any benefits. You yourself, like if there's a process you never are engaging in your organization, maybe you want to follow the SOP and see if you can do it. And then, you think to yourself, well, hey, I'm no dummy, and I still got stuck and hung up on a few things. There's your knowledge gaps. That's where you can make the resource more comprehensive and more detailed. So a couple more best practices that I wanted to suggest is, one is to make things multimedia. People learn differently, And they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, how many millions of words is a video worth in that case? Not everybody wants to read a set of instructions. So if you're following a recipe, I wonder these days how many people read a recipe versus follow a video on YouTube. I know when I'm going to cook something new, I'll often watch a video, somebody on YouTube explaining how they cook it. It's just how my mind works. I'm a visual learner. So a best practice when you're creating these standard operating procedures in your organization is to make them multimedia. Include photos, screenshots, arrows, diagrams, whatever you need to do. Another best practice is to link to other more detailed instructions on various things. Now I'm gonna share some visuals on the screen with you, and I'll give you an idea of what I'm talking about. But you want your standard operating procedure to be as robust as possible, as comprehensive, as detailed as possible, but you don't want to make a book about it. So what you will do is you will hyperlink, if you're using a multimedia material as opposed to, say, paper in a binder or a guide, a book that someone has to follow. Those are fine for written instructions, and you can still in those you can include images. But now what you can do when you do this digitally and in multimedia, you can have links to other resources for more details, and a person doesn't have to follow those links. As let's consider the example of somebody who's brand new to your organization is following along. The more they do the process, the less they have to reference this standard operating procedure. But there might be one or two steps that they get stuck on, and they need those reminders. So they go and they click on that. Or the process, let's say there's a particular material that is necessary for completing the process, and for the first year, the person had lots of access to that material. Maybe it was printer paper for the photocopy machine. Maybe it was a particular ingredient for cooking something. Depending on your business, you get the idea. But now they're out and they're like, oh, what do I do? Well, there would be a link in your standard operating procedure that shows them, in the event that you run out of this particular raw material, or in the event that this equipment is not working or whatever, this is what you do. And you can get more and more robust, and you can start to cover things that way. As I say, we'll get into that in a little bit more detail. And I think the last benefit that I wanted to share with you of creating standard operating procedures is the ability to start to automate. So we talked about improving by looking at it. When you collaborate with the team to make a standard operating procedure, others will chime in and say, hey, we could have improved the process by doing this or that, or what if we tried to do this? And suggestions start to flow. But another one is the automation. Someone who has some experience with workflow process automation can look at a standard operating procedure and say, oh, I can point out right here, there's 3 steps in your process here that we can automate, and we can streamline everything. So in this day and age where more and more automation is giving you a competitive edge over those others that do the same business as you do or something similar, and you can drive down your costs, improve your quality, consistency, and that kind of stuff, you really want to give consideration to automation. And I would really encourage you to think about this. If you're not automating anything, please reach out to us, and we do automations for people, no problem. But we want to start with understanding your process. We need to understand your process before we can automate it. And so if you had a documented standard operating procedure, we could look at it. In addition to helping you refine it and improve it and eliminate waste from it, we can also automate it. So let's go, and I'm going to give you some examples. The way I learned to do standard operating procedures was an exercise to do. And I would encourage you to share this video with everyone in your organization, anyone, because you really want to decentralize the process and get all stakeholders involved for the creation of standard operating procedures. So whether it's your sales team, whether it's people who are involved in the logistics of running your business, administrating your business, or whatever, everybody can contribute in some way. So distribute this video, share it with people, and say, okay, well, I want you to learn how to do this and how you might be able to contribute. But getting back to how I learned how to do it, I attended a workshop, and we were asked to write a standard operating procedure. So that's an exercise you can do. Maybe if you're going to share this video, then you can pause at this point and ask everybody to do a standard operating procedure. And the one we did was write a standard operating procedure. Remember, our recipe, a set of instructions, and it can be for anything, on how to make coffee. And so what we did is we went through that and then we compared. And we were taught to think of a standard operating procedure as being a set of instructions to be followed by someone completely inexperienced, someone who's never done it before. And that way you can be sure that it's more comprehensive, it's more detailed, and you're not missing some really important steps. Remember, the person who has lots of experience is going to skip those details that they think should be assumed. It's like, yeah, well, everybody knows this about the process, but not everybody knows it. The other analogy that was given to us is, think of computer instructions. Those programmers and developers out there know that a computer makes no assumptions. And we all hear about how robust and powerful artificial intelligence and machine learning is becoming, but there's a lot of instructions that a machine has to follow. There are certain rules they have to follow. They don't make assumptions. And I guess, maybe some AI expert would say to me, well, now they are sort of part of the machine learning is not an assumption per se in the human sense of or how the human brain works, but I digress. Try to think of not putting together a set of instructions where no assumptions need to be made, where essentially the computer or your intended audience would get hung up and stuck if you made an assumption. And so when we went through that exercise, then we came back later, and maybe you want to do this with your team, and we compared, and then we challenged one another on where we'd be stuck. And so that's sort of what I'm going to do with you. What I bring up on the screen is I'm going to go through sort of a poorly written, a poorly composed or created standard operating procedure, and we'll work our way from poor to mediocre to good, better, best kind of thing. And you'll get an idea from that. So maybe you want your team to watch just what I'm doing, but I think it would be a powerful thing for you yourself to write. Go ahead and do it on coffee. How to make, say, a pot of coffee for your staff or for your customers. And then restart the video and let's go through it together, and let me show you what I've come up with. Okay, we'll start off with what I would describe as a poor standard operating procedure, but it's better than nothing. I want to emphasize that it's better than nothing. Don't be a perfectionist. You can improve these over time, and that's a best practice, is to revisit these sets of instructions, revisit this material, and update it, because they'll become outdated as you change resources and equipment, and as technology improves within your organization and you change processes and all sorts of things, markets change. You need to update these, and you can make them more and more detailed. All right, so how to make coffee. So I've got step 1, put coffee in filter. Step 2, fill coffee maker with water. Step 3, turn on coffee maker. Step 4, wait for water to finish dripping through coffee filter. Step 5, dispose of used filter and coffee. Step 6, pour fresh coffee into cups. Step 7, serve. So if we challenge this as why it's a poor one, is there's all sorts of assumptions made. And we don't have time today to go through everything, but if you do this as an exercise and maybe take an hour with your team to go through it, you can really have some fun. But you get the idea here. Put coffee in filter. Well, there's assumptions being made there. Well, what is coffee? Where do I get the coffee from? What's a filter? Where do I get the filters from? Put or fill coffee maker with water. Okay, what water? Where does the water come from? And where's the coffee maker? And how is it that I fill the coffee maker with water? Turn on coffee maker. Well, how do I do that? Just plugging it in? Is there a special set of instructions? Is this a complex machine? Is it really easy? Wait for water to finish dripping through coffee filter. What are we talking about there? It's like, you get the idea. Dispose of used coffee filter. Where do I dispose of it? Pour fresh coffee into cups. Is that coffee beans that I put into cups? Now you say, well, of course, Michael, we understand that it's the freshly made coffee, but a computer wouldn't understand that. And someone who's never heard of coffee or has never made coffee before may, and I've done silly things like this following recipes where I made a different assumption than what was implied. And in this case, maybe, this is a silly example, but I would pour coffee grounds or coffee beans into the cups because I didn't realize they meant the coffee we just made needs to be poured into the cups. You get the idea. Now I'm saying this as a making coffee, but within your organization, you have some processes that people have never engaged in their life, and they're not really sure what this is because that's what your business does. And those assumptions will be more prevalent and you'll be more error prone. So there's an example of a poor. Let's move on now to sort of a mediocre enhancement on this standard operating procedure. Okay, you can already see that there's more details involved. I've got a new section, and I didn't say this before, but I would encourage you to create a template from which all of your company's standard operating procedures are created. Now, what I'm showing on the screen, we actually do have within my company templates for standard operating procedures, and that's not what I'm using. I put these together specifically for the video, and I'll try to share these with you so that you can reference these, but create templates that you're basically just changing the words and you're changing the content a little bit, but it will help you to follow the same sort of process in terms of creating a process to create a standard operating procedure. So the first thing I've added here is a section on resources, equipment, and tools needed as an example. I've got a little checklist there. Now, you saw in the last one, it didn't say any of that stuff. Well, a person, when you start with a recipe, I think a good chef might say, gather together, make sure your equipment's clean and ready to go, gather together your ingredients and that kind of stuff. So this is a helpful section as well. As we scroll down, you'll see that the steps now, I've got, step 1, measure 60 grams of whole coffee beans. It doesn't just say put coffee into filter. It's like, well, how much? How much do I put? And then it breaks each step into greater detail. So the person can skip over this. If they already understand what the primary step is suggesting, then they can just do it. But if they need, place grinding cup from coffee grinder on digital kitchen scale. And up here it said you're gonna need a digital kitchen scale. And then, reset it to 0. And you can look on the screen, pause this if you want to go through these details, but I'm not really trying to teach you how to make coffee here. You just get the idea. Carefully reseal coffee package to maintain freshness, and you go through the whole thing here. And there's way more granular details in this, what I'm referring to as not poor, but mediocre standard operating procedure on how to make coffee. So you can see where it's getting better. And I would encourage you, again, something is better than nothing. So if you're like, well, that seems okay to me, I don't know where that's just mediocre. You have to crawl before you walk, you have to walk before you run, right? You're gonna have to do a poor standard operating procedure before you do a mediocre one, and then you'll do some average, some good, better, best sort of scenario here. So this is an example of mediocre. Let's get to a better one. All right, now if we advance to the example of a good standard operating procedure, you can see what I've done is I've added some images. So in my resource equipment checklist, I've shown an image of the whole coffee beans. So a picture's worth 1,000 words. So a person going through this may really benefit from being able to browse the images. So I've put some images of the cream, the sweetener, the digital scale, the coffee grinder. So as a person is going through and trying to make the coffee, they're trying to actually do this. If you compare the likelihood of success with somebody following the first set of instructions who's never made coffee before versus the second or the third, this is more useful to them. They go, oh, okay, yeah, there's the grinder. I see it. Oh, that's what the coffee filters look like. I've never done coffee filters before. I didn't know what to look for. Now I see those because you've included the images. So going from mediocre to good is just about adding some images. Let's go to the next level, which is better. What you'll observe in my better definition of standard operating procedure is not only do I have images, but now you can see in the blue hyperlinks that I have links that a person can follow if they're going along this and they want more details. It's like whole coffee beans. Well, I see the picture there, but I can't find these wherever. Maybe the company's run out and they want to know how to source more, so they can actually follow these hyperlinks for more details. Now, somebody who got stuck and couldn't find the coffee, they saw the image there, could click on that hyperlink and it would bring up another document. It links to more details here. You wouldn't want to include all these instructions in the original SOP because it's okay to say, well, some assumptions can be made over time, but ideally, there is always a way, there's always some sort of reference material a person can go to for more information without having to bug you as the manager, without having to trouble anyone else. It's nice these days to have self-serve, to be autonomous, because the resources you provided to your team, to your organization, are very comprehensive. So in this example here, I've got sourcing coffee for staff and customers. Following a survey of staff and customers, ABC Corporation has decided to use either of the following brands of coffee for use in our staff kitchen and customer lounges. Shows one, and you can see that it gives more details of what it is. It has the image. There's also another hyperlink on the screen for them to follow if they wanted to reorder online. And then Kirkland signature, Ethiopian, light roast as another example. And then there's another link for instructions on supply chain management, on how to order if you've never ordered before. You're getting the idea here. There's more and more. And what, I just put this again together for the instructional video. But if I was creating something like this, I might also have some instructions that said, by the way, here's where we keep the coffee in the staff kitchen. Here's where it's kept in the customer lounge. And there might be some photos of a particular cabinet and some instructions, that kind of stuff. The more detail you give, you just eliminate error and you get very predictable results. And then finally, we can move on to what I'm describing as the best. As we go through the good, better, best. This isn't the best SOP you could ever put together. You can always improve continuously and refine, but there's elements now involved here in the multimedia best practice that make this far better than the better. So I'm calling this the best. So you can see at the beginning, right away, before it goes into the equipment and your checklist, it says, click the following thumbnail to watch a detailed instructional video on ABC Corporation's standard procedure for making coffee for both staff and customers. And then the person could just click on this and do this. So you can actually then make a video, and that is a best practice. So you would have that person who is most responsible, who has that internalized, fully unconscious competence, that second nature, who's able to do it, and they have that expertise and that knowledge, or specialized knowledge and skill and expertise. They can actually go through it while somebody video records them. You create this video, and now that new person or that inexperienced person can watch a video of the expert doing it, and there's all these subtleties that you would never be able to capture in trying to do a written set of instructions. It would just take so much, but a video can capture all of that. So the first thing I would encourage you to consider doing for standard operating procedures is making videos for all of them. And then you can see I also put on here, click on any link within the document for further detailed instructions regarding individual resources, equipment, tools, or process steps. And then of course we have all the various details and links there, and then go into the written set of instructions. So there you have it. I wanted to try to keep this video from being too long. Once again, I do encourage you to go through this as an exercise yourself and have your team do this. And maybe you want to pick something other than making coffee. Making coffee is a convenient one, but choose something simple and go through it together, and then have some fun, and maybe have some prizes or whatever, reward people for participation. And then you'll start to take what I started the video by saying, I get it, it's a little bit boring trying to document processes and create these resource materials, but hopefully I spent enough time in the beginning convincing you of some of the merits and benefits you'll get out of it, because what do? We all act in our own self-interest. I want you to always act in your self-interest, and it is in your self-interest to create these and then start to look for knowledge gaps and start to look for areas of improvement, collaborate with one another, distribute and decentralize the ability for multiple people. Remember, once you do that, you can also have the division of labor, and you can get all sorts of efficiencies and remove waste from the system by doing that. Watch our video on that if you don't know what I'm referring to there. Shout out to Adam Smith. And also automations, trying to do some automations. If you wish for us to do this for you, reach out to Bickert Management, and we can have a process expert go through this, do this from start to finish with you. Maybe you'll find that it's far more efficient for you financially to just have a company like ours that specializes in this kind of thing do this for you, put this together, and you'll reap the benefits of it. But I hope you'll give it a try and go through the exercise anyway, so that you, like I did in the beginning, I thought, oh, so boring. But then as I went through doing this, I saw some benefits to it, and I realized, well, we need to do this more and more often. I will tell you what I've observed in management, a long management career, is that if you just have written instructions, just because you have the standard operating procedures doesn't mean people will read them. You have to inspect what you expect. You have to follow up on it and make sure that people are following the instructions, and you have to schedule these types of things and look back at it and update it. We can go on and on. I wanted to keep the video to not be too terribly long, and we can always elaborate on any of these concepts. If you'd like, then leave a note in the comments section and let me know if there's something you'd want me to elaborate on. Also, let us know whether or not you use standard operating procedures. Is there a better way? As I went through my levels of, poor, mediocre, good, better, best, can you think of an even better way to do this? And don't forget to create templates. Leave comments that we can all learn from, because we need to learn from one another. Perpetual refinement.